Today, you open a refrigerator and cold is already waiting. But in an American city kitchen a century ago, the box could not make cold at all. It had no motor. No compressor. No electric cord. It only worked if someone carried a block of winter through your door. Before refrigerators, cold came by wagon. The wooden cabinet in the kitchen was called an icebox. It had insulated walls, metal-lined compartments, shelves for food, and doors designed to close tightly. It looked enough like a refrigerator that the two names were sometimes used for the same basic purpose. But the difference was enormous. A refrigerator creates a cooling cycle inside the appliance. An icebox could only preserve cold that had been produced somewhere else. Remove the ice, and it became an expensive cupboard. Before cold storage became convenient, households relied heavily on salting, drying, smoking, pickling, and canning. Those methods could preserve food, but they also changed its flavor, texture, or form. A block of ice offered something different. It could keep fresh milk cool, slow the spoilage of meat and produce, and make it more practical to save cooked food for another meal. That made the icebox valuable. It also made the household dependent on a supply chain most people never saw. The cold inside a summer kitchen often began months earlier, on a frozen lake. During winter, crews cleared snow from the surface and measured the ice. Horses pulled cutting tools across it, carving long parallel grooves. A second set of cuts turned the lake into a giant grid. Workers deepened those lines with saws, separated the blocks with iron bars and hooks, and guided them through channels of open water toward the shore. A piece of the landscape had become a product. But cutting ice in January did not help a family in July unless the industry could keep most of it from melting. The blocks were packed into large icehouses with thick walls and layers of insulation. Sawdust or straw filled the gaps and slowed the movement of heat. Some ice still disappeared. That was unavoidable. But enough survived for the warehouse to release winter a little at a time through the warmer months. The icehouse did not create cold either. It rationed a season. From storage, ice moved toward the city. Depending on the place and period, it might travel by wagon, boat, railcar, or through a chain of local depots. Large blocks were divided into household sizes and loaded onto neighborhood delivery wagons. By the late 19th century, this was no longer a tiny luxury trade in many American cities. Ice had become part of urban infrastructure. A delivery wagon could serve homes, apartment buildings, shops, and restaurants along one route. The same city that moved coal, milk, and mail was now moving cold. By the time one block reached a kitchen, it might already have passed through a lake crew, an icehouse, a transport company, a city depot, and a delivery route. The icebox was only the final stop. For the household, ordering cold could be surprisingly simple. Many customers placed an ice card in a window. The card showed different numbers depending on how it was turned, often 25, 50, 75, or 100 pounds. The number facing upward told the iceman how much ice the household wanted. The family did not need to chase the wagon down the street or wait beside the curb. A private need inside the kitchen had been converted into a signal that could be read from the sidewalk. The iceman saw the card, selected or cut the correct block, and lifted it with heavy metal tongs. Then came the hardest part. Ice is wet, slippery, heavy, and constantly shrinking. The iceman carried it from the wagon, through a back entrance or kitchen door. In an apartment building, that could also mean carrying it up the stairs. Water trailed behind him. The block grew a little smaller with every minute. The delivery was not finished until the ice sat inside the household's box. In many iceboxes, the block occupied an upper compartment. As heat entered the cabinet, the ice absorbed it and melted. Cooler air circulated downward around the food compartments. Milk, butter, meat, produce, and leftovers stayed cooler than they would on an ordinary shelf. But the temperature was not perfectly controlled. The box became warmer as the block shrank. Hot weather increased melting. Opening the door released cold air. Food placed near the ice might remain cooler than food stored in another compartment. An icebox was useful. But it was not a modern refrigerator made of wood. It was a cabinet built around a consumable source of cold. And that source worked by disappearing. Every hour of cooling used up part of the block. The household was not merely storing food. It was slowly spending ice. Melting also created another problem. Water. Some iceboxes directed meltwater through a drain. Others collected it in a pan beneath the cabinet. Someone had to inspect that pan and empty it. If a household forgot, the result could be a puddle spreading across the kitchen floor. That meant refrigeration created a routine. Check the card. Order the next block. Let the iceman in. Arrange the food. Watch the melting ice. Empty the water. Use perishables before the temperature rose too far. The box only worked because several people performed their part at the correct time. That is what made the system impressive and fragile. A missed delivery meant less cooling time. A heat wave made the ice disappear faster. A smaller block changed how long the box could remain useful. The food was still perishable, and households could not assume that milk, meat, or cooked dishes would remain safe indefinitely. The weakness was not simply that the cabinet was old-fashioned. The cabinet depended on an entire city arriving at the kitchen on time. The frozen lake had to be harvested. The icehouse had to preserve enough stock. Transportation had to move it. The depot had to divide it. The wagon had to reach the correct street. The card had to remain visible. The iceman had to carry the block inside. A family did not really own refrigeration. It participated in a refrigeration network. Over time, that network changed. Ice factories increasingly produced ice mechanically instead of depending entirely on frozen ponds and lakes. Motor trucks began replacing some horse-drawn wagons. Urban ice delivery became a major business. But the basic household problem remained. The kitchen still depended on a product that melted away and had to be replaced. Mechanical refrigerators changed where the work happened. Instead of receiving a new block, the appliance used machinery and an energy source to move heat out of the food compartment again and again. Cold no longer arrived as a physical object carried through the door. The transition was not instant. Early household refrigerators were expensive. Electricity was not equally available everywhere. Many families continued using iceboxes well into the 1930s. But as mechanical refrigeration became more affordable and widespread, the old network began to disappear from ordinary life. The window card came down. The delivery route lost customers. The tongs stayed on the wagon. The drip pan no longer needed to be emptied. The household did not have to predict when its supply of cold would run out. A refrigerator replaced the wooden cabinet in the kitchen. But it also replaced the labor and infrastructure outside it. Before mechanical refrigeration, a cold kitchen depended on frozen water, seasonal harvesting, insulated warehouses, transportation networks, neighborhood routes, visible signals, and workers carrying melting blocks through the door. The icebox was only the final machine in that chain. The refrigerator absorbed the work of the chain and hid it inside one appliance. That is why refrigeration now feels like a permanent feature of a room. You open the door, and the cold is simply there. But a century ago, cold was not something a kitchen quietly produced. It was something the city had to deliver.